welcome to the world of color blocking. And yes, I did say good things because I know some of you are going to be hesitant to the world of color blocking. It kind of cycles itself, but it also needs to adapt and evolve to the trends and all the cool factor and all of the things that we have going on today, right? So let's get into it and talk about color blocking and how to pair it with haircuts and so much more. And this was something that kind of just took the world by storm, and color blocking became just so massive in like the 60s and then moved into the 70s and then 80s and then 90s and then 2000s, and really has just been cycling itself back around. But it was really kind of this mod trend that happened in fashion in a really big way that just brought it into makeup, into the wardrobe we wear, and we see it everywhere on the streets. Also, just in art and modern art. You know, color blocking is something that typically people are talking about in fabric, right? Or just wearing a blue skirt with a yellow top, or you know what I mean? And just mix matching colors, bold, impactful colors. And you can see how easily that can be translated into hair, and that we are seeing it everywhere we look today. I feel like this is probably its 9th time back around when I talk to colleagues of mine who have been in the industry longer than I have. They've all kind of have their own stories and their own emotional attachments to color blocking and what it means to them and when they first saw it, because it is something so impactful, right? Everybody remembers the first time that they tried or did or saw some kind of crazy form of color blocking when it comes to hair when you're in the industry, because it's so inspiring and it's so cool and it's so different. One of my friends, Sonia Dove, just reminded me of she told me about a story when she was a young hairdresser in London, and she saw Annie Humphreys. If you don't know who she is, look her up, look up her work. And that like inspiration into color blocking was what made her want to do hair, and she's like a legend nowadays. So it's so cool. And actually, somebody that I used to educate with, Shannon Raw, and we owned a salon together, and she was a mentor of mine. So when it comes to color blocking, let's talk about, because there are an infinite amount of possibilities, okay? But let's talk about a client comes in, they want color blocking, they want something impactful. How do you as a stylist go about it? There are some ways you could totally go wrong with color blocking and get a result that you don't want later on when you don't kind of pair it together perfectly with the right haircut. How does she wear it, and how is that going to affect color blocking? Because obviously, if she was going to wear her bangs back, whoop, all of a sudden she's got blue hair, right? So that's the magic of color blocking right there. And it can be really fun and cool, but what if she didn't want something so punchy right at her roots? So that being said, you have to consider all the different ways that they're gonna wear their hair, not just the one that you're kind of going for in the moment. So we've got a bit of a pixie happening underneath, a bit of a pixie happening on top. Look at how much of an undercut the Bixie has, this version of the Bixie anyway, right? So there's your pixie, there's your bob, and that's why I chose to do my color blocking exactly where I felt like I wanted to show off in the haircut. So if you imagine this as a one-length bob, you would not even see any of the color blocking going on in the center, right? So this would be a perfect example of mimicking the haircut, taking the halo section of all the layers, really considering what's gonna show and how it's going to look all different ways, right? If she wanted to pin her hair back, she can show it off. If she needed to hide it, she could, right? So kind of showing and talking about your client. Consultation is key when it comes to color blocking, especially put on a specific haircut. And then a pigment called hyper coral so did, who am I thinking of? Christina Aguilera, but of course her hair was all solid blonde. So any type of chunky highlight could totally be considered a color block without having to put these huge panels. And that's another kind of like spin on thinking about color blocking and where you see it in the world, but it's still color blocking. And that's why the trend isn't going away, and you're gonna see it more and more out in the wild now that you're kind of thinking in that direction. So this is a good example of, here's a haircut that's one length, And instead of going with the haircut, right? Now, if you wanted to go with the haircut, this would look so sick if you just did a band just around the bottom. So cool. And that would be a great example of literally going with the haircut, because you're sectioning it exactly where it lays. You're putting a block of color just along the bottom of the haircut, or even going in horizontals, creating a shine line, right? So that would be an example of kind of going with the haircut versus breaking the haircut, and instead of doing horizontals, doing verticals like you see here. But when they wear their hair curly, and they wear their hair curly all the time, you're thinking more of like clouds of color, right? So you can even kind of visually think about the roots, the mid-lengths, and the ends being 3 areas, because you have this 3-dimensional shape. So when you think about the roots, you're thinking about what color do you want to see at the base and underneath all of the curls that's peeking through. Do you want to brighten it like a lime green and then have her have natural hair and you just see this like stark difference at the root, but it's hidden, right? The mid-lengths, you're going to really see a lot more, as well as the ends of the hair. So you're going to see this kind of 3-dimensional, like less, more, most, as the hair kind of progresses from roots to ends. And you can kind of think about how you could use a rainbow of colors and get this really clouded, really pretty kind of cotton candy effect. So see how underneath she looks totally natural. And then the minute I drop it down, boop, you can see all that funky blue and that bright, bright blue. It is so intense. That mask is blue, which is super fun, because all I had to do, I took a triangle section because she has this beautiful rounded haircut, right? So this kind of desertscape mullet is kind of an example of how color blocking can let your soul sing, just let it all come out. And so I wanted to do it on a mullet, and therefore I knew I was going to follow the shape of the haircut because it's such a strong shape, right? So what I did was I actually used a permanent hair color that has a heavier weight dilute through the top. Now each of the colors represented goes from a heavier weight dilute to, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna use a permanent that's heavier than 2 different types of demi-permanents that have this translucent veil of color through where I want her to feel airy and a little bit lighter. Yeah, love this look. And I think that that kind of shows you kind of how you're thinking about the haircut itself. I did do a triangular section here in the bangs for the haircut, and then everything was rounded and brought forward, right? And I even left these a little bit longer and kind of cut this up a little bit shorter, knowing that I wanted this to kind of stand out. So every time, I definitely recommend cutting before you color something. And every time you're gonna approach a color block, think about strategically the haircut and the color as one, as married, right? Think about them like this already. As you're cutting, you're planning the color. As you're coloring, you're making sure that like, okay, I'm gonna carve this little bit away, or I'm gonna accentuate that part. Thing maybe here, just like coming off of the parting and then maybe like trailing into something, right? So you are the artist when it comes to color blocking. You are the one who's gonna give that interpretation of your own look. But it could be, I don't know, like glitter or like water reflecting on an ocean or something like that, right? So it doesn't have to be extreme, but when it is, I think it's also about being tasteful and intentional, right? Now, when you're color blocking as well, you want to think about, is it going to sit on top? Is it internal, or is it external, right? So are you kind of using the perimeter of the hair to guide your color blocking? Are you doing it on the interior and it's peeking out? Or are you doing it on the interior and then cutting away the hair around it, right? Or maybe do you want this to be one solid color so that you can see all of those chunks coming through from right underneath? So sometimes you don't want something to be so separated right at the top of the head, and sometimes you do. And do you want it to be a big star-shaped section so that the points show more of the color, or they dip down into the haircut more, right? Think of it as a color palette that you see on swatches, right? When you go to the paint store or you're thinking about designing a room, right? What color is the couch, the rug, and the curtains? Then what color are the pillows you're gonna throw? Then what color are you gonna paint the walls, right? And speak to you and let your soul sing those colors out in a way that feels like it has like a flow, a balance, and comes from a deep inspiration that is well thought out and well executed.